But motivation will influence the style of leadership, and it definitely will influence your next decisions. Because like the next thing I really want to talk about is about like, do you choose to go solo or a team? When we will talk about like team, we'll also use some of these motivations to explain how it will influence the ways of the development. Now, the tricky thing about developing stuff solo is it has only one thing in the center, like of this concept, it's you. People choose to do things by themselves, mostly because they don't want to affiliate their efforts with other people, because they're super comfortable doing stuff themselves, probably their hobby. Most of the solid developments begin as a hobby, and it will stay hobby with 90% of them, with 10 maybe becoming something which is bigger than that and becoming a hobby that turn out business or the way to provide yourself with a living and things. To be like completely candid and honest, if you're going solo, you probably don't even need to hear this course. I mean, like you probably don't need to hear like literally everyone, because like it's all about you. Again, it's you. It's what you define, decide, including the course, the stages, the way you develop, how much time you allocate. You probably have resources saved or you have another job, so you would not be rushed. I mean, like by no one, community, industry, and for God's sake, you don't need to associate yourself with an industry to avoid all of the white buzz that will distract you from the production. It's about you. But there are a couple of things though I wanted to talk about solo development. They would be like how communication happens, how you develop as a person, and because it's very typical, try to explain like again by experience how it typically works. So working on the game, you know, like you most probably will have one proficient expertise, or you would not have expertise at all. You would just have a desire to start to do something. Solo development presumes that you will master a lot of specialities by yourself. I mean, like, and it would be you picking up the engine of your choice, and that would be based on what you heard on the internet, or maybe you will sign yourself in at some code courses and you will start to slowly become an engineer and write your own code and feel awesome about it. But as practice shows, everyone wants to start quickly. You will try to go as much as everyone else to try to attract various type of external expertise to accelerate on the development. I mean, like, and you would be defining those things as a subcontracts for yourself, right? I mean, like, so you would be hollering out to external people and occasionally ask them to produce for money or not for money, a variety of things, whether there would be a 3D models or representation of yourself into the community, or maybe you would need some animations to be produced or music or stuff. As practice shows, everyone starts on the same level. I mean, like, you start to order those things, you get very quickly disappointed in the quality or external human relationships associated with this process, and lots of the people, they internalize and they try to master as much of those expertise related to the game development process as possible. You learn new tools, you stop talking to these people. I will be exemplifying Unreal Engine mostly because it's simpler for me, because I've been working with it for so many years. I mean, like, you start and you try to master as much as you can. Then you will inevitably still get to the point where you will understand that you want to do something, or you maybe not want to do something. Once you stop at the comfortable level of different tools and expertises that you want to have, you will return to this process again. You will start to order these external processes and all these external things in more of a professional manner, because you would understand more what you need, and your project would be on the later stage and you can show it, exemplify to people as a universal medium, and they would understand you better. But again, solo is something that should be a completely different subject of the conversation, but an important element to think about is that it's effectively your hobby and the process which is 100% under your control. You don't need to communicate with anyone if you do things solo, except the stages when you will choose to. So that's important. It makes things awfully more simple. It may be limiting, but it also allows you to take all of the decision on the fly, and you're also saving a lot of effort in creating a lot of documents and a lot of artifacts and a lot of concept and other documents that can be qualified as a guidance for the team to develop, because you have all of that in your head. You're a one-man army, and you can follow up with that in a fashion which is very comfortable for you. Team compositions, original IP. And when it comes to the original IPs, we need to talk about this important thing. And the stickers are people. They represent codes, arts, design. And one of these stickers and one of these people is you. Depending from who you are, your vision of the game, and how game and the team will function in the future would be drastically different. If you come from the code, you will think about the game mostly as code. If you come from art, you would think about it as art, design, self-explanatory, right? Like stories and so on. Because this dichotomy of the game, as a definition, like where the game is a creative product, definitely originates from someone who came up with the idea first, but at the same time, it should be produced by people of so many disciplines. It becomes a very complex subject, how the team is built at the scratch. We can have cases where team has one leader, and maybe it started solo, or maybe you came up with an idea or an interesting feature as an engineer, or a set of interesting art assets, both concept-wise or maybe models, and now you want to build the game around it. If you stay the one single person, the team who starts to holler at other people, and team grows a little bit in a more of an exponential manner, you will have the situation where it will be like this. Right? For example, you're an engineer who started to talk to some of your friends. You found a friend who's a designer, and you found a friend who is an artist. But because you've been assembling this team based on your authority and ownership of the idea, you will have a composition where you assume the position of the natural leader. People who are joining later in the art and design, they will follow you later. It can be a little bit of a different situation over here, where we have another case, which is same art person, been working in a big company or has a buddy, like in code. You know each other for some years. You have decided to stop working for a larger company and to exodus together, and you have some vibe and previously existing relationships. You want to build this game. You're two founders. And maybe you've been dreaming about this opportunity for a long time. You've been going to pub and drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, whatever you've been doing, hanging out, having these numerous conversations about this idea that sparked before. And you spent like 30 hours, outlining how things should be working together, maybe based on the previous experiences working in a company you worked before. You understand each other. You have a situation where you have two founders which have unique interpersonal dynamics in the previous experiences that make you owners of the game. But what an interesting element that happens here, situation like this, where you have three people and you have design over here, and you would say, that would they equally would wipe together with each other? It's barely possible. The human dynamic is always that you have a couple of people, or you have a singular leader who own most of the decisions, and then you have people who are taking on the responsibilities to hierarchically do stuff. In ideal world, if it's there's like three of you, you represent different type of expertise and you wipe together in a great, insane manner. It's a blast. If you really do understand each other in a way where you can work together with the respect to each other and share the leadership, this is great. But this is rarely happens. So in most of the cases, this case will probably look like this. And you would have two people who effectively hold the leadership on the previously existing concept, and they will start to compensate on the expertises that they don't really have at this point. And if you're interested, like a lot of these companies, they will develop later into this, and that would be a level design and music, LD, but the ownership would be typically in hand of two people, or one person who builds the rest of the team, because we looked at the previous case. Already at these two examples, I can tell you, and just to exemplify another one, because it would be more convenient. Just for a better example, teams which are effectively aligning, in a way where you have the same composition for the singular leadership and for the person who came up with the game and who knows the game, but that's the art person, it would look like this. The tricky thing about it is that those teams, they would operate very differently from the point of view of definition, priorities, and how they structure things, and how they look at the game as an entity, and how they would want to build things. Also, all of these compositions and variety of different compositions, when the people meet and when they build the dynamics, they start to obtain initial internal flaws and internal benefits and strong parts because of those compositions. To just exemplify a little bit, if you have a team which is centered by the leadership of the person who's from engineering, you probably would have less issues associated with the stack of technical products, system of control, the version control, and infrastructure, architecture in general. But at the same time, you most probably would have a situation where it would be extremely feature-centric and not design-centric, but just feature-centric. Interesting features will take the priority over features which are necessary from the build. Code has the tendency in this specific configuration, to conflict with design, because every engineer in the world thinks he's a great game designer as well. I mean, like, we all know that, right? Design needs to be aligned in this composition with code as early as possible. Art in this type of compositions typically take a supplementary role, and experiences an issue of underestimation of actual efforts that has to be produced due to the game development process. There is also elements that engineering-centric teams just miss in general when they build the team and build the team composition, and one of them would be, very expectedly, UI, UX. It comes as a supplementary function. Typically, games look ugly on the long term with underestimation of artworks. Now, if you have an art-centric team, most probably initial set of materials produced is a lot of concept arts, maybe some models, maybe some stuff being connected together. And the teams which are centered around people who are art leadership in general, they think about using less utility into the process of development. So where the code development team would be 100% sure that at all of the initial stages, white boxing is fine, buying marketplace asset is completely fine. It's all about make sure that you have 60 FPS and DLSX and RTX support, and making game a technical masterpiece. Art people will be focusing stuff about art. People might want to talk about it or not talk about it, but specialities in the game development are tribal. It's a very simple explanation for that, is that where you have a person who assumes the position of the leader. What is the position of leadership? Position of leadership is that then when you come up with the whole idea of this gig, you come up with the idea of the game, you started this whole thing in one way or another, and you're taking risk and responsibilities associated with other people's decision or following you to start building the game that you're building together. And those people delegate you part of their decisions, and they agree to that because they trust your vision. This is how you lead everyone to the victory. Very annoying position, to be honest, hard to be added if you take it seriously, but this is how it works. And design-centric configurations are interesting and extremely annoying for a lot of people, to be honest, because design typically takes its time, writes a huge amount of paper, we do guilty as charged, creates a lot of lore, produces a lot of references, builds experience, fun and touch and feel things, right? But what people don't really want to talk about it in the production is that design, in fact, overproducing so much content and does it almost every time, that most of the people on the team who are not writers and not really readers, in art and code and all the other disciplines, they just don't want to read that. And a lot of designers, get over the board producing so much content that it's extremely hard to read it. And then they get extremely offended that people in art and code, they don't really read through this, familiarize themselves with the stuff they're writing, and that's an issue. Because it goes against the proper estimation of what you do and how you do that. And this is an issue that has to be aligned. Now, coming back onto the shared leadership, I would use only one example because otherwise we will go into a whole number of crazy schemes. Let's say as an example that this is an art and code, you have initial alignment, and you have to have an initial alignment for this type of config in between people who are doing this with the previous experiences. Then you probably have a better chances to focus on the strong elements that your team has. But at the same time, and this is the reason why I'm putting this config here, it would be extremely hard to bring in new ideas with the already conducted set of rules and vision done by two people who would support each other in most of the circumstances. Question of innovative versus the already set stuff would be one of the questions that would need to be discussed on this team. And then this is the original IP composition stuff. And then another thing which I wanted to quickly touch at, it's basically teams that are made for money. I will give you two examples. It's team compositions set for revenue. Two types, production teams. Let me show you the vehicle which is set for money and how is it different from companies which are set for product development, original IP development. Entrepreneur, that's business model. This model is heavily, in any way or form, externally dependent. So let me show you how this works. So that's the business model. That's the original entrepreneur that puts money into the whole thing. He's there to make it work for money. He do not understands business, so this person would be dependent from external feedback one way or another. The difference here is that all of the businesses mostly are built for scale. So you'll have flow 1, flow 2, flow 3. That's business for money. It's an entrepreneur decided or heard somewhere that video games makes a lot of money, With the help of someone who controls one of these flows or all three of these flows, hired people, we can mark them up somehow. People with experience in the industry, let's do it this way as an example. They develop a business model, which is effectively a filter and the blueprint for everything that would be developed. Ironically, business do not really presumes a lot of innovation, and business always follows the money because its major idea is revenue building that suppresses and overcome all the other types of the ideologies, while in the team compositions for original IP and a solo development, it's always a mixed bag, right? I mean, like people get into the video games for money and something else, or just for something else, or a 3 or 4 motivation at the same time. What we're talking about business for business is the revenue only bottom line, so it needs to be correspondent to how business thinks. Business thinks, and for this entrepreneur, this business is not the only business he's probably invested. Business that operates based on a business model, which is effectively a filter and a template for everything that has to be done in the company. And he has people from the industry who helps them, and they are typically producers qualified for this specific role, and they scale almost immediately to try out and to filter out hypotheses. Let's say develop 3 mobile games at the same time, following the money, and then scale if this works to flow 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Another type of the example would be if we would take one of those teams, and I would take just this team. I would take this entrepreneur guy and I would put it here, and I would say that this entrepreneur guy knows this design guy, and this interpreter guy invested money into the design guy, and this business being successful depends specifically only on the fact on what and how much they discussed before, how design been able to express how much time it would take to go until the scale, how much expectations are aligned. But this business would need to go into the scale based on the external communication of the entrepreneur, expectations that entrepreneur is having, investing money into this project. And often this configuration, if you attract money too early, will push you to decisions which would go against your production. So this is the reason why you will hear a lot for this course, that you actually need to attract money and you actually need to grow at a point where it's comfortable and reasonable for your production. I want to show you a situation that really happens when you ignore this advice, and that would be, let's say this team. We would just put it here, and we would say premature scale, we'll call it, by whatever reason. Can happen for a variety of reasons. Can happen for good reasons or bad reasons. Can happen because you've been pushed by an interpreter from the premature scale. And he knows the friend, and the friend saw the game before the vertical slice and wanted to invest money, and you took all of this money on board preliminary, and you are not really ready, you don't have an internal benchmark, and you compromised at this decision because it's life and you will get to a number of issues. Or it can happen for a good reason. Let's say you are an amazing community leader, but you have a weakness for people. You get into the situation where you start posting about your game too early, and instead of following this team composition, which is essential for the first stage of the pre-production, there's a whole bunch of people at the forums, at the Reddit, somewhere else, who are 3D modeler, and who is 3D guy, and then there is another 3D guy. And then, for some reason, it's a PR manager. And let's say there's 20 of them. They would not even connect it all together. The issue here is that when you're trying to save money at the initial stages, and you basically promise people they will proliferate on the future scale, so the interest would be respected, you will get to the point where you will get money, and instead of paying people who you actually need on this stage, you would need to pay all of those people on the team because you promised them. And most probably in this situation, it would be aligned with your time load. And it means non-optimal use of resources. And to exemplify it better, let's say the ideal curve of production for your project is you want to have 4 people, and you're doing this for free because all of these are partners in one way or another, or you have minimal expenses when you are developing the initial prototype, and for some reason you still allowed more people to flock around the team, and you raise money for the next stage, which is production of the vertical slice, and you would have 5 extra 3D people, and for vertical slice production you only need 3. But these 2 guys are already with you from the beginning of the process, and because you got them too early, you most probably will pay them, while they efficiently would have no work into the second stage. And that would mean that your time load is not cool. It just doesn't work. Be careful about the premature scale. Ideally, you want to keep the team as small as possible through the whole process of development. until you get to the stage where you understand the composition of the team, you understand something about the game. Like you pretty much have the gist of it, you know, like, and you know that it's because you, for example, you know, like that this guy from the design, you know that you are building in its basic definition, third person adventure, whatever. You can tell me any different genre, you know, like I can exemplify it in the same manner. I mean, like, let's say it's a 3D person adventure.